Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9 Ending Explained. Following on from last week's eventful and deadly episode, we saw the repercussions of point and shoot as we embarked on the 9th installment of Season 6, titled Fun and Games. Jimmy and Kim's relationship was on the rocks, Gus seemed to have a weight lifted off of his shoulders, and Mike, well, was feeling remorseful. So let's get into the episode and recap, break it down, and explain all that there is to take away. Here is Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Season 6 Episode 9 felt like a well-paced episode that had the somber mood that one would expect after all of the events that unfolded in the previous two. We saw tensions at the highest they've been in Season 6. In Episode 7 with Howard being killed, and in Episode 8 with Lalo being killed. This episode felt like it was split into thirds, with each main group of characters getting a fair amount of screen time in their newfound life without the threat of Hector Salamanca, and also the scene of Howard being killed in front of them. This episode opened up with the song Perfect Day being played over a sequence of clips from both Jimmy and Kim's day, intertwined with Mike and his men cleaning up Kim's apartment. We had shots such as Jimmy getting a new sign put up on his office, Kim representing clients in court, intertwined with a coffee being poured with blood being seeped out of a rag. This highlighted how they're having to go about their normal day whilst there was a murder scene being cleaned up at home, showing that they just need to carry on despite the traumatic event that they just witnessed. The drastic shift in emotions from Kim celebrating a win, to her being stood in her living room looking at the room that was once filled with Howard's body and so much fear only a few hours ago, showed how it was like nothing ever happened in the physical world, but her mind was certainly tainted. Something one would imagine would be hard to comprehend. The final shot before the opening sequence ran was to be the foreshadowing of the end of the episode, Kim lying on a bed facing away from Jimmy being distant, as he stated how one day when they wake up, they'll realize that they haven't even thought about it, and it seemed Kim's way of doing so was to leave and get out of there. But we'll get to that. Just like the episode, I'm going to break this video down into each individual character arc that we saw. Gus. The first part of the episode that we saw Gus involved in was him being summoned to meet the Salamancas and Don Eladio, as just as was predicted, Gus had been blamed for the second disappearance of Lalo Salamanca. Hector was the only person that was originally aware that Lalo was alive, and it's ultimately what caused this scene to go in Gus's favor, and for Hector to not be believed by his own cartel members despite telling the truth. We saw Bolsa read out a note that stated how Lalo was still alive, and that he was going to seek revenge on Gus as he planned on plotting against the Salamancas. As this shot was happening, we got the glow of the fire being mirrored and reflected in the lens of Gus's glasses, to support the idea that he was always against them, and that the hatred was there. Gus responded with no defense at all, due to the fact that he brushed it off as ridiculous that Lalo could still be alive, insinuating that there was no way that it would be true. Lalo ultimately made his death so believable that even his own crew didn't believe him or Hector, and Gus then got to walk out of there free and alive to the sound of Hector ringing his bell in anger with nobody believing him. As Gus was on his way out, he looked down at the poolside where Max was murdered by Hector in a previous season, acting as a subtle reminder of how dangerous things can be, and a familiar past that justified the reasoning as to why he was so paranoid earlier on all throughout this season. After this, we saw Gus in a wine bar, and you could sense that it was the first time that he'd done something like this in a long time. There were none of his men there with him, he had a smile on his face and he looked happy, something we've not seen for a while. David approached Gus and even stated how he'd not seen him in a while as well, which showed the change of mindset Gus now had following the taking out of Lalo Salamanca. He likely felt free for the first time in a long while and wasn't looking over his shoulder. We saw Gus hit it off with David over their mutual connection of wine, but when he went off to fetch a bottle to show Gus, he left. There was a quick and abrupt change in emotion after he took a sip of the wine that was described as meaty and bloody flavored, as if he was drinking the blood of his victim, Lalo. Or it acted as a reminder of the collateral damage that can occur. We saw Gus leave even after forming the connection and enjoying the art of conversation with somebody. Maybe due to the fact that he knows that he can't get too close to anybody and be a real human with connections, due to the danger that he naturally puts people in, and he wouldn't want what happened to Max to happen to anybody else. Mike. After the opening 20 minutes focused on Gus, we had the next section that was focused on Mike. Whilst he was cleaning up the scene in Kim's apartment, we saw him looking down at the photo of Howard inside of the apartment underneath a rug, which we now know was something that reminded him of an individual who also got caught up in this mess, and was Nacho. Nacho was killed in episode 3 of season 6, and we saw that Mike was involved in ensuring that his death was something that was carried out. We saw Mike open up the case with Nacho's father's identity in, to then close it and put it away, to then go and get it again and then give him a call, showing that it was clearly something that had been on his mind for a while, and supported the shots in last week's episode where he was looking at Howard in a way like he was an innocent victim. It reminded him of Nacho. Once Gus met with Nacho's father, he informed him of how Nacho is never going to be found, and that the Salamancas will have what's coming to them, and that there will be justice for his death. However, his father stated that justice will never be found, but revenge is what they're seeking and that the cycle will never end. It showed how even though Mike wanted to do right by informing Nacho's father, it didn't take any of the weight of his death off of his shoulders. He must feel somewhat responsible, and by stating how he was different to the rest, it showed there was a sense of feeling there. But with Mike being shot down in a verbal sense, it's another wrong that can't be justified. Jimmy and Kim. This was the episode where it seemed to show us why Kim was not involved in Breaking Bad. We saw the pair arrive at a memorial service for Howard Hamlin, where they needed to be on their A-game and stick to the story that they'd been telling the police, amongst a room full of people that cared for Howard, with his face being in every inch of the room, acting as a reminder of their involvement in his death. We saw that it had successfully been believed that he walked out into the ocean, just like Mike had said it would be set up like. We saw them first involved in a conversation with Rich, where they spoke about how devastating it was that Howard's wife didn't have a body to bury, in which we saw a close-up of Jimmy's face having been staring at a photo of Howard only moments earlier, cementing the harsh reality of what happened. Following this, we saw the pair go up and speak to Howard's wife, where she was with Cliff. We saw them both walk up the stairs, and I thought it was interesting that when they put their glasses down, Kim's glass was put down first despite being further away, and it led Jimmy to put his glass down half on the edge, where it almost dropped and fell on the floor. I think that represented one of a couple of things. It could represent how on edge the pair are, and that there almost isn't room for the two of them together. Jimmy's glass being on the edge could symbolize how when they're together, they're both living on the edge, and they could fall at a moment's notice, and it could all smash and chaos could erupt. Just like we went on to see in the conversation with Cheryl. It was handled, but it could be difficult and be something that they have to put up with in the future. Cheryl bombarded Jimmy with questions as she didn't believe that Howard was an addict, and Jimmy switched on his lawyer head and was able to justify himself, his actions, and make out like Howard was crazy for thinking that he was harassing him. But Cheryl kept pushing, and that was where we then saw Kim, who had stayed quiet for the entirety of it, step in and bring up a story from the past which had been exaggerated of him in the office, which supported the idea of Howard being an addict. This was a moment that was almost like Jimmy and Kim's last dance, and final piece of the Howard Hamlin plan, making the wife believe it all, and she somewhat did. After this, we saw Kim in court, where it was revealed to us that she was no longer practicing as a lawyer, and that she'd written to the bar to inform them. This showed us that it had all got too much for her. Prior to the second half of the season launching, we had a teaser of Kim taking the oath that you state when you get sworn in as a lawyer, where she stated, "I will conduct myself uprightly and according to the law," which is something that she'd broken and she must feel she can't do knowing that she's living a lie. Following this, we then saw Jimmy come home and plead with her to keep her job, and that he'll help her get through it, to which he walked into the bedroom and her bags were all packed up and she was planning on leaving him, saying how when they're together, people get hurt. She mentioned how she knew about Lalo all along, and that if she told Jimmy, they wouldn't have wanted to continue with the Howard Hamlin takedown as Jimmy would have gone into hiding. Kim was having too much fun, and telling Jimmy the truth would ruin it, and that was one of the main things that was keeping the spark in their relationship alive. This was a scene that felt extremely real, and you could sense how much Jimmy wanted her to stay, but she'd simply had her mind made up, so much so that the final shot we had was of the back of Jimmy's head being in focus, to the sound of Kim zipping up her suitcase. I don't think this will be the last we see of Kim. It didn't feel like a powerful enough goodbye for the character, but then maybe it's just like life. People come and people go, and the show is just going to replicate that. After this, we cut to the era of Breaking Bad, where a slightly older, thinner-haired Jimmy was inside of his mansion, waking up with somebody who wasn't Kim. I thought this was an interesting shot to start off with, as we've seen the type of person he was when he was with Kim, to now, what he was like in this era. Waking up with somebody in his bed who he appeared to have paid for, a polar contrast to what it was like a few seconds earlier, begging Kim not to leave him. It's the first glimpse we've had of this era of Saul Goodman in a while, so I wonder, with the episode finishing on it, if it means next week we'll be present in that timeline. I thought this episode was a great inclusion to Season 6. It slowed the pace down as it needed to, grounded us and allowed us to reflect on what had happened, and saw how the characters responded to it. We've still got a few more episodes left, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So, there you have it. Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9, Ending Explained. What did you think of Episode 9? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.